Hello there, and welcome to the Sleepy Library. Tonight, we are drifting into the gentle embrace of the natural world, where wonder unfolds in every leaf, every ripple of water, and every breath of mountain air. Nature surrounds us with mysteries more beautiful than dreams, with rhythms more ancient than time itself. This is not just a journey through forests and rivers and skies. It is a journey through the quiet architecture of life on Earth, through patterns woven across millions of years, through connections so subtle they slip past our waking thoughts. The things we will discover are not only fascinating, but peacefully real. If you enjoy these quiet journeys, I invite you to like, subscribe, or share a thought below. It helps others find their way here too, one sleepy soul at a time. But for now, just breathe. Let the day fall away from you and allow your mind to settle into stillness. Let us begin. Forests create their own weather patterns. Deep within the world's great forests, something remarkable happens that transforms the air above and around them. Trees do not merely sit beneath clouds waiting for rain to fall. They actively participate in creating the very storms that nourish them. Through a process both ancient and ongoing, forests move enormous quantities of water from soil into atmosphere. A single large tree can draw up and release hundreds of liters of water each day, sending moisture skyward through its leaves. When millions of trees do this together across vast distances, they become living fountains, exhaling humidity that rises to form clouds. In some regions, particularly the Amazon rainforest, this relationship grows so strong that the forest actually triggers its own rainy season. The moisture released by trees accumulates in the atmosphere until it reaches a tipping point, then falls back down as rain, completing a cycle that the forest itself has set in motion. Scientists studying this phenomenon have found that forests can influence rainfall patterns hundreds of kilometers away from their borders. The water that evaporates from leaves joins the atmospheric circulation, traveling on wind currents to regions that might otherwise remain dry. This means that forests in one part of the world help sustain life in another, sending gifts of moisture across invisible highways in the sky. The relationship between forests and rain is so intimate that when forests are cleared, regional rainfall often declines, sometimes dramatically. The land grows drier, not just because trees are absent, but because the very mechanism that generated rain has been dismantled. In this way, forests are not passive landscapes. They are active participants in Earth's climate, gentle architects of the weather that shapes continents. A single teaspoon of forest soil contains more living organisms than there are people on Earth. Beneath your feet in a healthy forest lies a universe of life so dense, so intricate, that it challenges comprehension. If you could scoop up just one small spoonful of rich forest soil and examine it under powerful magnification, you would discover a teeming metropolis of organisms. Billions upon billions of bacteria cluster in microscopic communities. Fungi thread through the darkness in delicate networks. Protozoa glide between soil particles like tiny whales in an ocean of dirt. Nematodes, smaller than a human hair is wide, tunnel through spaces between grains of sand. All of this in a single teaspoon. This hidden world is not merely present. It is actively working, performing tasks that make life possible for everything above ground. Bacteria break down dead leaves and fallen branches, transforming them from solid matter into nutrients that tree roots can absorb. Fungi form partnerships with tree roots, extending the reach of the root system by thousands of times and helping trees communicate with one another through chemical signals passed along fungal threads. These microscopic creatures are the foundation upon which forests stand. Without them, dead material would simply accumulate, never decomposing, never releasing its nutrients back into the cycle of life. Trees would starve in a world of plenty, unable to access the elements locked in fallen wood and leaves. But with this vast underground community working ceaselessly, breaking down, building up, exchanging and transforming, the forest thrives. The soil breathes with invisible life, and from that breath rises the majesty of ancient trees. Roughly 70% of a forest's carbon is stored underground in the soil itself. When we picture forests absorbing carbon from the atmosphere, we often imagine it accumulating in tree trunks and branches, locked away in wood. And certainly, trees do store carbon in their trunks, building it into every ring of growth. But the larger story happens where we cannot see it, in the dark soil beneath. Most of the carbon that forests capture from the air eventually makes its way underground. Leaves fall, branches drop, trees die and topple. All of this material, rich with carbon, settles onto the forest floor, where it begins the long process of decomposition. As bacteria and fungi break it down, much of the carbon is incorporated into the soil itself, binding to minerals and organic matter in forms that can remain stable for hundreds or even thousands of years. In some forest ecosystems, particularly those in cooler climates or areas with thick organic soil, the amount of carbon stored below ground far exceeds what is held in living trees. A forest might look modest above ground, but be sitting atop a massive carbon reserve accumulated over centuries. This underground storage is crucial for the global climate. Soil carbon does not simply disappear when trees are cut down. It can remain sequestered for long periods, continuing to keep carbon out of the atmosphere. But when soil is disturbed, plowed, or eroded, this ancient storage can be released, returning to the air carbon dioxide. Protecting forest soil becomes as important as protecting the trees themselves. The ground beneath a forest is not simply dirt. It is a library of captured carbon, a reservoir of the atmosphere's past, holding in stillness what once moved through the air. There are an estimated 63,000 known tree species on Earth, with possibly 9,000 more waiting to be discovered. Earth's forests speak in 63,000 different voices, each tree species a unique expression of life's creativity. From the towering coast redwoods of California to the twisted baobabs of Madagascar, from the cloud forest laurels of the Andes to the mangroves standing in tropical tide pools, trees have found ways to thrive in nearly every climate and landscape. 63,000 known species represent just what we have documented so far. In remote mountain valleys, deep within rainforests, or in regions not yet fully explored, scientists estimate that 9,000 additional tree species may exist, unnamed and unstudied. Some of these hidden species might be rare, growing only in small areas, while others might simply have escaped notice because they closely resemble their relatives. The diversity of trees reflects the diversity of Earth itself, the myriad ways that sunlight, soil, water, and climate combine to create different challenges and opportunities. Each species represents a solution to the puzzle of survival in a particular place. Some trees have evolved fire-resistant bark to withstand periodic burns. Others have developed the ability to grow in waterlogged soils where most plants would drown. Still others have formed partnerships with specific insects or birds, depending on them for pollination or seed dispersal. This vast catalogue of tree species is not merely a curiosity for botanists. Each species plays a role in its ecosystem, providing food, shelter, or other services to countless other organisms. The loss of a single tree species can ripple through an ecosystem, affecting everything from soil chemistry to the survival of rare insects that depend on that tree alone. In this way, the diversity of trees is a measure of Earth's biological wealth, a testament to the creativity of evolution, and a reminder of how much remains to be learned about the living world. Elephants help plant forests by dispersing seeds through their digestive systems. In the savannas and forests where elephants roam, these massive animals serve as gardeners, though they would never think of themselves that way. When an elephant eats fruit from a tree, it is not merely feeding itself. It is beginning a process that may result in a new tree growing many kilometers away. The seeds of many forest plants are designed to pass through an animal's digestive system. The journey through an elephant's gut does several things that help the seed. First, the digestive process breaks down or softens the seed coat, making it easier for the seed to germinate. It is eventually deposited. Second, the seed is transported far from the parent tree, reducing competition and allowing the species to spread into new areas. Third, the seed is deposited in a package of natural fertilizer, the elephant's dung, which provides nutrients for the young seedling. Some trees have evolved to depend almost entirely on elephants for dispersal. Their fruits are designed to attract elephants, and their seeds are tough enough to survive the journey through the digestive tract. Without elephants, these trees would struggle to reproduce, unable to move their seeds effectively across the landscape. Scientists studying forests in Africa and Asia have found that areas where elephants are absent often show less forest regeneration and lower tree diversity. The forests become stagnant, with all the trees clustered in the same locations, generation after generation. But where elephants move through, the forest is dynamic, always changing, with young trees sprouting in unexpected places, carried there by the wanderings of these gentle giants. In this way, elephants are more than inhabitants of the forest. They are architects of its future, shaping the landscape with every meal, planting tomorrow's trees with every step. Over 3/4 of the world's accessible fresh water flows from rivers in or around forests. Water and forests are bound together in a relationship so fundamental that disturbing one inevitably affects the other. The majority of fresh water that humans rely on, the water that fills rivers, supplies cities, irrigates crops, and sustains ecosystems, originates in or near forested landscapes. Forests act as giant sponges, absorbing rain when it falls, holding it in soil and vegetation, and then releasing it slowly over time. This gradual release creates steady, reliable river flows, rather than dramatic floods followed by droughts. The canopy of a forest intercepts rainfall, slowing its fall and allowing it to soak into the ground rather than rushing across the surface. Tree roots create channels in the soil, through which water can permeate deeply. Fallen leaves and organic matter form a spongy layer that holds moisture like a reservoir. All of these factors together mean that forested watersheds produce clean, consistent water supplies. When forests are removed from watersheds, the character of rivers changes. Water runs off the land more quickly after rain, creating floods. But between storms, the rivers may dwindle to a trickle because there is no longer a natural reservoir to sustain flow. The water also carries more sediment because there are no tree roots to hold soil in place. It may be warmer, because there is no forest shade to cool it. And it may contain more pollutants, because forests filter water as it passes through them. Communities that depend on rivers for drinking water have learned, sometimes through difficult experience, that protecting upstream forests is essential for water security. A healthy forest is worth more than the most expensive water treatment plant, because it provides purification services for free, year after year, asking only to be left intact. The connection between forests and water is so strong that in some regions, protecting forests is classified as water infrastructure, as vital as pipes and pumps. Mountains store water as snow and ice, providing fresh water for billions of people downstream. In the heights where air grows thin and cold, where peaks scrape the belly of clouds, mountains perform a service that sustains life across vast lowland regions. They capture moisture from the air and store it as snow and ice, creating natural reservoirs that release water gradually as temperatures warm. More than half of humanity depends on this mountain water for drinking, agriculture, and industry. The system works with elegant simplicity. As moist air rises up mountain slopes, it cools. Cool air cannot hold as much water vapor as warm air, so the moisture condenses and falls as rain or snow. In cold regions or at high elevations, this precipitation accumulates as snow during the winter months. The snow compacts into ice over time, forming glaciers in some areas. When spring arrives and temperatures rise, the snow and ice begin to melt. The meltwater trickles down mountain slopes, gathering into streams that merge into rivers. These rivers carry the stored winter moisture into lowlands, providing water during the dry seasons when rain may be scarce. This annual cycle of storage and release has shaped civilizations. Many of the world's great cities and agricultural regions exist where they do because of rivers fed by mountain snowmelt. The Ganges, nourished by Himalayan glaciers, supports hundreds of millions of people. Rivers flowing from the Andes sustain agriculture and cities along South America's western coast. The Colorado River, fed by snowpack in the Rocky Mountains, brings water to one of the driest regions of North America. But this system is sensitive. As global temperatures rise, mountain snowpack is declining in many regions. Snow melts earlier in the year, and more precipitation falls as rain rather than snow. Glaciers are shrinking. This shifts the timing and quantity of water available downstream, creating challenges for communities that have relied on predictable mountain water for generations. The mountains, for all their permanence and stone, are changing, and with them, the water systems they support. Some deep-sea corals can produce their own light through bioluminescence. Far beneath the ocean surface, where sunlight never reaches, a different kind of light flickers in the darkness. Deep-sea corals, animals related to the colorful reef builders of shallow tropical waters, have evolved the ability to create their own illumination. They produce light through a chemical reaction within their tissues, combining molecules in ways that release photons without generating heat. This phenomenon, called bioluminescence, likely evolved very early in coral history, perhaps more than 500 million years ago. The light these corals produce is typically blue or green, colors that travel well through water and are easily detected by other marine animals. Some coral species emit brief flashes when disturbed, while others create waves of light that ripple across their colonies. A few can even produce glowing slime that they release into the water. Scientists studying this phenomenon have several theories about why corals bioluminesce. The most compelling is what researchers call the burglar alarm effect. When a predator approaches and disturbs the coral, the resulting flash or wave of light may attract larger predators that could eat the original threat. In this way, the coral's light serves as a distress signal, calling for help from the darkness. It is a passive defense, requiring no movement or decision from the coral, just an automatic response to touch. The chemicals that corals use to create light are found across many different groups of marine organisms, suggesting that bioluminescence evolved independently many times throughout the ocean's history. But corals appear to have been among the earliest to develop this ability, glowing softly in ancient seas while life above was still finding its way onto land. Today, their descendants continue the tradition, transforming the ocean's depths into a realm of living stars. An estimated 90% of animals living below 500 meters in the ocean can produce light. In the deep ocean, darkness is not absence but presence. It is a thick, pressing thing, absolute in its blackness. Yet in this darkness, light blooms. Not sunlight, which cannot penetrate more than a few hundred meters down, but light created by living things. The vast majority of deep ocean animals, 9 out of every 10 species, have evolved the ability to make their own light. This widespread bioluminescence has transformed the deep ocean into a realm where light is not a given from above, but a tool wielded by life itself. Animals use their light for many purposes. Some, like certain species of anglerfish, dangle glowing lures to attract prey. The light mimics the appearance of small organisms, drawing curious fish close enough to be snapped up. Other animals use light for camouflage, producing a glow on their undersides that matches the faint light filtering from above, erasing their silhouettes from the view of predators below. Still others use flashes of light to communicate, sending signals to potential mates or warning rivals. Some organisms have taken bioluminescence to spectacular extremes. Certain squid can create complex light displays across their bodies, flickering in patterns that may convey specific messages. Deep sea jellyfish pulse with colors when disturbed. Tiny plankton flash brilliantly when the water around them moves, creating shimmering displays that mark the path of swimming animals or breaking waves. The chemistry of bioluminescence is elegant. Most organisms use a molecule called luciferin, which reacts with oxygen in the presence of an enzyme called luciferase. The reaction releases energy in the form of light. Different organisms have evolved different versions of these molecules, producing lights of various colors and intensities. Some animals produce their own luciferin, while others obtain it from their diet or house symbiotic bacteria that make it for them. The prevalence of bioluminescence in the deep ocean suggests that light confers significant advantages even in a realm defined by darkness, or perhaps especially in a realm of darkness where any source of illumination becomes precious. In the depths, life has learned to carry its own stars. Waterfalls add oxygen to rivers, supporting diverse aquatic life downstream. Where water cascades over rock and plunges toward the riverbed below, something vital happens. The falling water breaks apart, shattering into droplets and spray. As it tumbles through the air, it mixes with that air, incorporating bubbles and stirring violently when it hits the pool at the waterfall's base. This turbulent mixing injects oxygen into the water, a process called aeration. The oxygenated water then flows downstream, carrying this dissolved oxygen to all the aquatic life that depends on it. Fish, insects, and countless microorganisms all need oxygen to survive, just as terrestrial animals do. But in water, oxygen can be scarce, especially in warm temperatures or in slow-moving sections of rivers where the surface barely disturbs. Waterfalls solve this problem naturally. They act as the river's lungs, breathing oxygen into the flow. The effect is most pronounced just below the waterfall, where oxygen levels can spike significantly higher than in the quieter water upstream. But the benefit extends for long distances downstream. As the enriched water flows onward, it supports richer ecosystems than would be possible in a uniform, oxygen-depleted river. Fisheries have long recognized this effect. Rivers with waterfalls often support larger fish populations, and the areas just below falls can be particularly productive. The oxygen boost allows for greater densities of aquatic insects, which in turn feed fish and other predators. The entire food web benefits from the simple fact of water falling through air. In addition to oxygenation, the turbulence created by waterfalls serves another purpose. It helps break down organic materials and stirs up sediments that might otherwise settle and smother the riverbed. The constant churning keeps the water moving and mixing, preventing stagnation and supporting the health of the entire river ecosystem. In this way, waterfalls are not merely beautiful landmarks, they are functional elements of river health, aerators and mixers that help maintain conditions necessary for aquatic life. Angel Falls in Venezuela is so tall that much of its water turns to mist before reaching the bottom. In the remote wilderness of Venezuela, a river flowing across the top of a massive flat-topped mountain reaches the edge and simply falls. It drops 979 meters, nearly a full kilometer, into the jungle below. This is Angel Falls, the tallest uninterrupted waterfall on Earth. The fall is so long and so steep that something remarkable happens during the descent. The water begins to disintegrate. As it plunges through the air, wind catches the falling water, tearing it into droplets. The droplets break into finer mist. By the time this mist reaches the forest floor at the base of the cliff, much of it is no longer liquid water, but a fine spray that drifts on the breeze, settling gently on leaves and rocks rather than crashing into a pool. The spray creates its own microclimate at the base of the falls, keeping the surrounding vegetation constantly moist and lush. The mountain from which Angel Falls descends is called Ollantaytambo, a tepui in the language of the indigenous Pemon people. Tepuis are tabletop mountains, flat-topped peaks with vertical sides, found in this region of South America. They rise abruptly from the surrounding lowlands, isolated islands of high-altitude habitat. The rivers that form on their summits flow across the flat tops until they reach the edges, where they fall spectacularly to the ground below. Angel Falls was unknown to the outside world until 1933, when American aviator Jimmy Angel flew over it while searching for gold. The indigenous people, of course, had known of the falls for countless generations, calling it Kerapakupai Meru, meaning waterfall of the deepest place. The falls remain difficult to reach, surrounded by dense rainforest and accessible mainly by boat and foot. This remoteness has helped protect it, keeping the area largely pristine. Visitors who make the journey speak of the otherworldly quality of the place, the sense of standing at a threshold between earth and sky, watching water transform from liquid to mist as it surrenders to gravity across a distance that defies human scale. Forests are home to 80% of the world's terrestrial biodiversity, despite covering only 1/3 of Earth's land surface. If you were to catalogue every species of animal, plant, fungus, and microorganism living on land, you would find that the overwhelming majority of them make their homes in forests. 8 out of every 10 terrestrial species live among trees, despite the fact that forests cover just 1/3 of the land. This concentration of life speaks to the unique characteristics that make forests such productive habitats. Forests provide something that few other landscapes can match: vertical complexity. A forest is not a single layer, but many layers stacked upon each other. The canopy catches sunlight high above the ground. Below it, an understory of smaller trees grows in filtered light. Beneath that, shrubs and ferns populate the shadows. On the ground, mosses, fungi, and countless tiny organisms inhabit the leaf litter. Each of these layers creates distinct habitats with different conditions of light, temperature, and moisture. This vertical structure multiplies the available living space, allowing many more species to coexist than could survive on open ground. The variety of tree species itself contributes to biodiversity. Different trees produce different fruits, flowers, leaves, and barks, each of which can support specialized insects, birds, and mammals. Some animals feed exclusively on specific tree species or parts of trees. Remove that tree, and those specialists may vanish as well. Forests also create stable microclimates, buffering against temperature extremes and maintaining humidity. This stability allows species that cannot tolerate dramatic environmental fluctuations to persist. Ancient forests, in particular, can harbor species found nowhere else, organisms that have evolved alongside the trees over millennia and cannot survive in younger or disturbed forests. The biodiversity of forests is not evenly distributed. Tropical rainforests contain the highest concentrations, with some areas supporting thousands of species in just a few square kilometers. But even temperate and boreal forests harbor remarkable diversity, especially of fungi, insects, and microorganisms. Every forest, regardless of latitude, is a community of thousands of species interacting in ways both obvious and hidden. Protecting this biodiversity requires protecting forests, not just as collections of trees, but as complete ecosystems, with all their layers, their complexity, their ancient relationships intact. Mountains regulate climate patterns by blocking and redirecting air masses. When wind carrying moist air encounters a mountain range, it cannot simply flow through the stone. It must rise, climbing the slopes, ascending toward the peaks. As it rises, the air expands and cools. Cool air holds less moisture than warm air, so the water vapor begins to condense, forming clouds and often producing rain or snow on the windward side of the mountain. By the time the air crosses the summit and descends the other side, it has lost much of its moisture. This creates what meteorologists call a rain shadow, a region on the leeward side of the mountains that receives far less precipitation than areas on the windward side. The effect can be dramatic. On the western slopes of the Cascade Mountains in the Pacific Northwest, rainfall can exceed several meters per year, supporting lush, temperate rainforests. But just over the crest, on the eastern slopes and the lands beyond, rainfall drops to a fraction of that amount, creating semi-arid conditions. The mountains divide the climate as sharply as they divide the landscape. This rain shadow effect shapes ecosystems, determines where forests can grow, influences where rivers flow, and even affects human settlement patterns. Some of the world's great deserts exist in part because mountains block moisture-bearing winds. The Gobi Desert lies in the rain shadow of the Himalayas. The deserts of Patagonia exist because the Andes block moisture from the Pacific. Mountains also influence climate through elevation. As altitude increases, temperature decreases. This creates distinct climate zones stacked up the side of a mountain. At the base might be warm lowland forests. Higher up, cooler temperate forests appear. Higher still, the trees shrink and thin until they disappear entirely at the tree line. Above that, alpine meadows give way to bare rock and permanent snow. A mountain compresses the climate zones of an entire continent into a single ascent. This vertical climate gradient creates isolated habitats. Species adapted to cool conditions can survive on mountaintops, even when surrounded by warm lowlands, like islands in the sky. Conversely, warm adapted species cannot easily cross cold mountain passes, leading to populations that evolve separately on either side of a range. In this way, mountains do more than shape weather. They shape life itself, creating and maintaining diversity through the simple physics of elevation and airflow. A single large tree can capture and filter more than 37,000 liters of water per year. Trees are living water towers, drawing moisture from the soil and releasing it into the air. But they also act as natural filtration systems, cleaning water as it passes through the earth around their roots. The amount of water a single large tree processes in a year is staggering. 37,000 liters is enough to fill a medium-sized swimming pool or to meet the annual drinking water needs of several dozen people. But the tree does not merely move this water from ground to sky, it transforms it. When rain falls on the forest, some of it lands directly on leaves and bark, where it may evaporate back into the air. Some runs down the trunk and soaks into the soil. Some percolates through the leaf litter on the forest floor, beginning a journey downward through layers of decomposing organic matter. The tree's roots absorb water from the soil, pulling it upward through the trunk and into the branches and leaves, where it eventually evaporates through tiny pores called stomata. This process, called transpiration, moves vast quantities of water into the atmosphere. But before the water reaches the roots, it passes through the soil itself. And the soil beneath a tree is alive with organisms and rich with organic matter. As water filters through this living soil, contaminants are removed. Bacteria break down pollutants. Fungi absorb heavy metals. Organic matter traps sediments. By the time water reaches deep soil layers or underground aquifers, it is cleaner than when it fell as rain. Trees enhance this filtration process. Their roots create channels through which water can penetrate deeply. The roots themselves can absorb certain pollutants, and the mere presence of the tree, soil in place and contributing organic matter, improves the soil's filtering capacity. Urban planners have begun to recognize this service. Planting trees in cities can reduce stormwater runoff and improve water quality in rivers and streams. A single tree may not seem like much, but a forest of them creates a natural water treatment system more efficient than many human-engineered alternatives. The trees ask for nothing in return, only the chance to grow and the rain to nourish them. They stand silently, pumping clean water into the sky and into the ground, year after year, performing services we are only beginning to fully understand and value. Rivers sculpt valleys and canyons over millions of years through the patient work of erosion. Look at a river valley from above, and you see a landscape that seems permanent, as if the mountains and canyons have always existed in their current form. But this is an illusion of the human timescale. Rivers are powerful sculptors, carving and reshaping the land with infinite patience. Given enough time, a river can cut through solid rock, creating canyons thousands of meters deep. The process begins with water flowing downhill, following the path of least resistance. Even a gentle stream carries tiny particles of sediment, grains of sand, fragments of rock. As the water moves, these particles scrape against the riverbed, wearing it down grain by grain. Larger rocks tumble along the bottom during floods, grinding against the bedrock like tools. Chemical weathering also plays a role, as slightly acidic river water slowly dissolves certain types of rock. The rate of erosion depends on many factors: the volume of water, the gradient of the riverbed, the type of rock, the amount of sediment being carried. Soft rocks erode quickly. Hard rocks resist but eventually yield. A river flowing over a landscape of mixed rock types will cut down through soft layers first, creating a series of steps and waterfalls. Then it begins the long work of cutting through the harder layers beneath. Over millions of years, this process can create astonishing landscapes. The Grand Canyon of the Colorado River is perhaps the most famous example. A chasm nearly 2 kilometers deep and hundreds of kilometers long, carved by water and time. But countless smaller canyons and gorges around the world tell the same story of rivers patiently cutting down through stone. The shape of a valley also changes as a river ages. Young rivers in steep terrain cut deep, narrow V-shaped valleys. As the land erodes and the gradient becomes gentler, rivers begin to meander, swinging back and forth across a widening floodplain. These meanders slowly migrate, eroding the outer banks where the current is fastest and depositing sediment on the inner banks where the current slows. Over time, the river can create broad, flat valleys many times wider than the river itself. Rivers are never still, never finished. They are always working, always shaping, carrying the mountains to the sea, one grain at a time. The valleys we see today are snapshots in a process that has been going on for millions of years and will continue for millions more. Bioluminescence first evolved in corals more than 540 million years ago. Long before forests covered the land, before dinosaurs walked, before fish crawled onto shore, ancient corals were already glowing in the dark ocean. Scientists studying the evolutionary history of bioluminescence have traced its origins in octocorals back to the Cambrian period, more than 540 million years ago. This makes bioluminescence one of the oldest forms of communication on Earth, older than sound, older than many of the senses we take for granted. The timing is significant. The Cambrian period is known for the Cambrian explosion, a time when life diversified rapidly and many major animal groups first appeared in the fossil record. The ocean was transforming from a relatively simple place into a complex ecosystem with predators, prey, and countless strategies for survival. In this context, the ability to produce light would have conferred significant advantages. But why did corals start glowing? The most compelling hypothesis relates to oxygen. In the early ocean, oxygen levels were lower than today, and oxygen molecules can be dangerous to cells, creating harmful compounds called free radicals. Bioluminescence uses oxygen as part of the light-producing chemical reaction, which may have initially evolved as a way to safely dispose of excess oxygen. Only later did organisms begin using the light for communication, defense, or hunting. By mapping the presence of bioluminescence across the evolutionary tree of corals, scientists have concluded that the ability evolved once in an ancient common ancestor and has been passed down through hundreds of millions of years. Some coral lineages have lost the ability over time, particularly those that moved into shallow waters where bioluminescence provides less advantage. But many deep-sea corals retain it, their tissues carrying on a practice older than most forms of life on land. When you see a deep-sea coral glow, you are witnessing something that has barely changed since the dawn of complex animal life. The light that flickers across those polyps is the same light that illuminated ancient oceans when Earth was young. It is a living connection to the deep past, a signal that has been transmitted across hundreds of millions of years, from ancestor to descendant, unbroken, still glowing in the darkness. Approximately 25% of all land-dwelling biodiversity lives in mountains. Mountains, with their harsh conditions and steep slopes, might seem like unlikely havens for life. Yet, they harbor 1/4 of all terrestrial species. This concentration of biodiversity in mountain regions reflects several unique characteristics of mountainous terrain. First, Mountains compress multiple climate zones into a small vertical space. At the base of a mountain might be warm, humid forest. A few kilometers up, temperate zones appear. Higher still, alpine tundra and permanent snow. Each of these zones supports different communities of plants and animals, creating layers of distinct habitats stacked one atop another. This vertical diversity allows mountains to support species from many different climatic regions in close proximity. Second, mountains create isolated habitats. Peaks and ridges act as barriers, preventing species from mixing with relatives on neighboring mountains. Over time, populations on different mountains evolve separately, becoming distinct subspecies or even separate species. This isolation has generated remarkable diversity, especially in insects, plants, and small animals that cannot easily cross the gaps between mountain ranges. Third, mountains serve as refuges. During ice ages, when glaciers covered much of the high latitudes, some species retreated to mountains in lower latitudes, finding cold conditions at high elevations, even when the lowlands remained warm. When the climate warmed again, these species persisted on mountaintops, isolated above the warming lowlands. This pattern has created sky islands, patches of high elevation habitat surrounded by unsuitable lowland terrain. Species on these sky islands often include relicts, organisms left over from earlier times, now surviving in small refuges. Mountain biodiversity faces unique threats. As global temperatures rise, the climate zones on mountains shift upward. Species adapted to cool conditions at high elevations have nowhere to go. They are already at the summit. They cannot move higher, and they cannot move to other mountains without crossing inhospitable lowlands. This makes mountain species particularly vulnerable to climate change. Despite covering only about 22% of Earth's land surface, mountains provide essential services beyond biodiversity. They supply water to more than half of humanity, regulate climate, and support human cultures that have adapted to high-altitude life. Protecting mountain ecosystems means protecting both their unique species and the services they provide to billions of people downstream. Soil stores more carbon than the atmosphere and all plants combined. When we think about carbon storage on Earth, we often picture trees, vast forests locking carbon away in wood. And while trees certainly store carbon, the real champion is beneath our feet. Soil contains more carbon than the atmosphere and all the world's plants put together. This carbon exists in several forms, from recently fallen leaves, still recognizable on the surface, to ancient organic matter chemically bonded to minerals deep underground. The carbon enters soil through plant life. When plants photosynthesize, they pull carbon dioxide from the air and use it to build leaves, roots, and stems. When these parts die and fall to the ground, they become food for soil organisms. Bacteria and fungi decompose the organic matter, releasing some carbon back to the atmosphere as CO2, but incorporating much of it into the soil. Some of this incorporated carbon remains in the soil for just a few years, part of an active cycle of decomposition and growth. But some become stabilized, bound to minerals, or protected in ways that slow decomposition dramatically. This stable carbon can remain in soil for hundreds or thousands of years. Different soils store different amounts of carbon. Peatlands and wetlands, where decomposition is slow due to waterlogged conditions, can accumulate massive amounts of carbon, layers of partially decomposed plant material meters thick. Forest soils, particularly in cool climates, also store large quantities. Even grassland soils hold significant carbon in the dense root systems that grow and die year after year. The amount of carbon in soil makes it a critical component of Earth's carbon cycle and climate system. Disturbing soil through ploughing, erosion, or drainage can release this stored carbon back into the atmosphere, contributing to climate change. Conversely, practices that build soil health and increase organic matter can pull carbon out of the atmosphere and store it underground, helping mitigate climate change. Soil is more than a medium for plant growth. It is a vast carbon reservoir, a slow-moving system that holds the atmosphere's past and will help shape its future. Protecting and restoring healthy soils may be as important for climate stability as protecting forests, yet it receives far less attention. Beneath the surface, in the dark and patient Earth, lies a key to understanding and managing global carbon. Some trees can live for thousands of years, bearing witness to millennia of history. In remote mountain groves and sheltered valleys grow trees that were already ancient when human civilizations first emerged. These are the elders of the forest, individual organisms that have stood in the same spot for 3,000, 4,000, even 5,000 years, silently witnessing the rise and fall of empires, the transformation of landscapes, the slow drift of climates. The bristlecone pines of California and Nevada are among the oldest known living trees. Some individuals have been alive for more than 4,800 years, making them older than the pyramids of Egypt. These trees grow in harsh, dry, high-altitude environments where conditions limit growth but also protect against disease and competition. They grow slowly, sometimes adding less than a millimeter of width in a year, but this slow growth creates dense wood that resists decay. Other species also achieve remarkable ages. Coast redwoods and giant sequoias can live more than 2,000 years. In Europe, certain yew trees are believed to be over 3,000 years old, though their hollow trunks make exact dating difficult. In Japan, ancient cryptomeria trees stand as living monuments, some more than 1,000 years old. What allows a tree to live so long? Several factors contribute. First, trees have indeterminate growth, unlike most animals. They can keep growing larger throughout their lives, adding new wood, new branches, new leaves. Second, trees can seal off damaged sections while continuing to grow in healthy areas. A tree can lose half its trunk to fire or disease and still survive, regrowing around the wound. Third, trees in harsh environments often live longer than those in favorable conditions. Slow growth in cold or dry areas produces wood that lasts, and the harsh conditions prevent the buildup of pests and diseases that plague trees in more hospitable climates. Ancient trees serve as archives of climate and environmental history. Their growth rings record rainfall patterns, temperature variations, volcanic eruptions, and other events going back centuries or millennia. Scientists studying tree rings can reconstruct past climates with remarkable precision, extending our knowledge far beyond the brief period of written records. These ancient beings also inspire a sense of humility and connection. To stand beside a tree that was a seedling when the Roman Empire flourished, to touch wood that has been growing for longer than any human institution has existed, is to glimpse a different timescale, a patience and persistence beyond our usual comprehension. Some waterfalls freeze solid in winter, creating towers of ice that climbers scale. In certain parts of the world, winter brings a transformation to waterfalls. As temperatures plunge below freezing, the falling water begins to freeze, not all at once, but gradually. Spray freezes on rocks, creating layers of ice. Slower trickles freeze into icicles. The main flow may continue beneath a shell of ice, or it may freeze entirely, stopping the waterfall in mid-motion. The result is a frozen waterfall, a sculpture of ice that can tower tens of meters high. These ice formations are not uniform. They take on intricate shapes, columns of ice like organ pipes, bulges and mushrooms where water froze as it flowed, delicate curtains of icicles hanging in sheets. The interior may be hollow, where water continued to flow even as ice built up around it. The surface can be smooth and glassy, or rough with frozen spray. Frozen waterfalls have become destinations for ice climbers, mountaineers who scale them using ice axes and crampons. Climbing frozen waterfalls is technically demanding and dangerous. The ice can be unstable, fracturing under the climber's weight. The cold is extreme, and the climbs are often remote. But the allure is strong. To ascend a structure of ice that exists only for a few months each year, to engage with something simultaneously solid and ephemeral. One famous frozen waterfall is the Fang in Vail, Colorado. It forms each winter as water seeping from a cliff freezes into a vertical pillar of ice more than 30 meters tall. The pillar is freestanding, a single column with air on all sides. Climbers must ascend its outer surface, their axes biting into ice that stands unsupported between ground and rock. Not all frozen waterfalls are scalable or even accessible. Some exist in remote mountain valleys, visited only by wildlife. Others form and melt away without anyone witnessing them. They are winter's secret artwork, transient sculptures shaped by cold and water and time. When spring arrives, they weep themselves back into liquid and flow away, leaving only photographs and memories to prove they existed at all. Raindrops can take 10 minutes to fall from the canopy to the floor in a dense rainforest. In the densest tropical rainforests, where trees tower 60 or 70 meters high and their crowns interlock to form a nearly continuous canopy, rain does not fall the way it does in open country. When a storm passes overhead and releases its water, the first drops hit the canopy layer, the topmost leaves and branches. There they may sit for a moment before dripping to the next layer below. From leaf to leaf, from branch to branch, the water descends through a tangle of vegetation so thick that it intercepts and redirects the rain dozens of times. A single raindrop might land on a high leaf, run to the edge, drip onto a lower leaf, sit there as the leaf bends under the weight, spill onto a vine, trickle down the vine's length, drip onto a fern frond below, and only then, after minutes of this slow descent, finally reach the forest floor. The journey can take 10 minutes or more, a fall that would last mere seconds in the open. This slow percolation of rain through the forest canopy has several effects. It reduces the erosive power of rainfall, preventing the heavy tropical storms from washing away soil. It distributes water more evenly, allowing it to soak into vegetation and soil rather than running off the surface. It also creates microclimates within the forest, with the upper canopy much drier during a storm than the lower levels, which remain humid and dripping long after the rain has stopped. The interception of rain by the canopy means that the forest floor receives less direct rainfall than the open areas above the canopy. Some water is absorbed by epiphytes, plants that grow on tree branches and have no connection to the ground. These air plants capture rain and fog, building their own small reservoirs in the forest heights. Other water evaporates from wet leaves before it can drip down. This means that cutting down a rainforest changes not just what grows at ground level, but also how water moves through the entire system. The intricate architecture of the forest, built up layer by layer over centuries, becomes a structure for managing water. The forest is not just growing in the rain, it is part of the rain's journey, shaping how water falls, where it goes, how much reaches the ground. In this way, the The forest and the climate are not separate things, but parts of a single integrated system. Over 60% of anti-cancer drugs have been derived from natural sources, including rainforest plants. The biodiversity of nature is more than an abstract concept or an aesthetic value. It is a library of molecular innovations, millions of years of evolutionary experimentation encoded in the chemistry of living things. Nowhere is this more apparent than in the development of medicines. More than 60% of drugs used to fight cancer were originally discovered in nature, many of them in rainforest plants. Plants produce an astonishing array of chemical compounds, many of which serve as defenses against insects, fungi, or other plants. To create these compounds, plants employ biochemical pathways that can be extraordinarily complex, building molecules that human chemists struggle to synthesize even after discovering them. Some of these natural compounds happen to have effects on human cells, effects that can be harnessed to treat disease. The process of discovering these medicines often begins with ethnobotany, studying how indigenous peoples use plants for healing. Traditional knowledge points researchers toward plants that might have medical properties. Scientists then work to isolate and identify the active compounds, test them for efficacy and safety, and eventually develop them into drugs that can be produced at scale. One famous example is the rosy periwinkle, a plant native to Madagascar. Compounds from this plant have been developed into drugs that are highly effective against certain types of leukemia and lymphoma. Before these drugs, some of these cancers were nearly always fatal. Now, many patients survive. The rosy periwinkle's natural habitat has been largely destroyed, but fortunately, the plant has been cultivated elsewhere. Other anti-cancer compounds have been found in Pacific yew trees, soil bacteria from Easter Island, marine sponges, and numerous tropical plants. Each discovery represents not just a triumph of medical science, but a debt to the natural world. The organisms that produce these compounds did not evolve them to cure human diseases. They evolved them for their own survival. We are, in a sense, borrowing solutions developed over millions of years of evolution. The fact that so many medicines come from rainforests and other biodiverse ecosystems highlights what is at stake when these habitats are destroyed. Every species that goes extinct is a library burning, a set of chemical innovations lost forever. We do not know which plants, animals, or microorganisms might hold the key to treating diseases we have not yet cured. The loss of biodiversity is not just an environmental issue, it is a medical one, with implications for human health that we may not fully understand until it is too late. Wetlands are among the most productive ecosystems on Earth, rivaling rainforests in biodiversity. When we think of biodiverse habitats, we often picture tropical rainforests with their towering trees and colorful birds. But there is another ecosystem, equally rich in life, though often overlooked. Wetlands. These transitional zones where water meets land are among the most productive and biodiverse places on the planet. Wetlands include marshes, swamps, bogs, fens, and floodplains, any area where soil is saturated with water for at least part of the year. This waterlogged condition creates unique challenges for plants and animals, but it also creates opportunities. Species that can tolerate wet soils and fluctuating water levels find abundant resources and relatively little competition. The productivity of wetlands comes from several factors. First, the abundance of water means plants rarely face drought stress. Second, wetlands often occur in places where nutrients accumulate, washed from surrounding lands and concentrated in the wet soils. Third, the interface between water and land creates habitat complexity. Some areas are permanently flooded, others are only seasonally wet, and some are dry except during storms. This variety of conditions allows many different species to coexist. Wetlands support remarkable concentrations of birds, both resident species and migrants that stop to rest and feed during their journeys. The shallow waters provide nurseries for fish, amphibians, and countless invertebrates. Wetland plants, adapted to grow in waterlogged or flooded soils, form dense stands that provide shelter and food. Even the microbial communities in wetland soils are exceptionally diverse and active. Beyond biodiversity, wetlands provide essential services. They filter and purify water, removing pollutants and sediments as water flows through. They store floodwaters, reducing downstream flooding. They recharge groundwater supplies. Coastal wetlands protect shores from storm surges and erosion. Some wetlands store vast amounts of carbon in their waterlogged soils, where decomposition is slow. Despite their value, wetlands have been extensively destroyed. More than half of the world's wetlands have been drained for agriculture, filled for development, or degraded by pollution. The remaining wetlands are increasingly recognized as critical for both biodiversity and human welfare, deserving of protection and restoration. A healthy wetland may look wild and unproductive to someone accustomed to tidy farms and forests. But beneath that apparent chaos is an ecosystem working at peak efficiency, filtering water, storing carbon, supporting life in abundance, asking only to be left wet. Mountains create their own weather at their peaks, where clouds and fog can form instantaneously. At the summit of a high mountain, weather operates by different rules than in the lowlands. Clouds do not merely drift past, they form in place, condensing out of the air as if by magic. Fog can appear in moments, erasing visibility and chilling the skin with sudden moisture. This local weather is created by the mountain itself. As air flows up a mountain slope, it rises into regions of lower atmospheric pressure. Air expands and cools. Cooler air holds less moisture, so if the air was already near saturation, the cooling causes water vapor to condense into tiny droplets. These droplets are fog if you are standing in them, or clouds if you are viewing them from a distance. At the summit, this process happens continuously. Wind forces air up the slopes. The air cools as it rises, and clouds form right at the peak. The summit may be shrouded in cloud, while the valleys below bask in sunshine. Or conditions might shift, the wind changing direction, or the air drying out, and the summit cloud evaporates as quickly as it formed. Pilots flying near mountains are acutely aware of this phenomenon. They know that clouds clinging to peaks are not separate from the mountain, but created by it. They also know that where clouds form, turbulence and icing conditions are likely, making mountain weather hazardous even when forecasts for the broader region suggest clear skies. Hikers and climbers experience this summit weather intimately. A calm, clear morning can give way to fog and wind by midday, as the sun heats the slopes and strengthens upslope winds. The temperature can plunge. Visibility can drop to a few meters. Navigation becomes challenging when landmarks disappear in the mist. But then, just as suddenly, the fog can lift, revealing views that stretch for hundreds of kilometers. The mountain makes its own world, a place where weather is local, immediate, and changeable. Standing at a summit wrapped in fog, you are inside a cloud, touching the substance of weather. The moisture on your face is not rain, but the cloud itself, condensed from air that has traveled up from the valleys below. It is a reminder that weather is not something that happens to the landscape, but with it, a collaboration between air and earth. The clouds that form above us hold secrets and stories of their own. They drift and shapeshift overhead, sometimes noticed, sometimes ignored. Yet they are performing essential work in the grand machinery of Earth's climate. Let us turn our gaze upward now, to the atmosphere itself, to the deserts where water is precious, and to the countless other wonders that nature weaves across this beautiful, patient world. An average cumulus cloud weighs about 500,000 kilograms, roughly the same as a jumbo jet. When you look up at a fluffy white cumulus cloud drifting peacefully across a blue sky, it appears light as cotton, weightless and ethereal. Yet that cloud, for all its airy appearance, contains water. Lots of water. Scientists have calculated that an average-sized cumulus cloud holds approximately 500,000 kilograms of water. To put this in perspective, that is about the same weight as a fully loaded Airbus A380, one of the largest passenger aircraft ever built. How, then, does something so heavy float? The answer lies in the nature of the water itself and the air that surrounds it. The cloud is not made of large droplets or raindrops, but of microscopic water droplets, each one tiny beyond imagination. These droplets are so small that they fall through the air extremely slowly, their descent impeded by air resistance and the viscosity of the atmosphere. Meanwhile, warm air rises continuously from the ground below, creating updrafts that push against the falling droplets, keeping them aloft. The cloud floats not because it is light in total weight, but because it is made of countless tiny particles, distributed across a vast volume of space, each droplet suspended by forces that balance gravity's pull. The fact that clouds can hold so much water becomes more impressive when you consider that this water came from Earth's surface. It evaporated from oceans, lakes, rivers, and soil, rose into the atmosphere as invisible water vapor, and then condensed around tiny particles of dust, salt, or other aerosols to form visible droplets. Eventually, when these droplets merge and grow large enough, they overcome the updrafts and fall as rain. But until that moment, they drift, held aloft by air currents and the delicate physics of small particles in fluid, carrying the weight of a jet plane through the sky without wings or engines. Approximately 67% of Earth's surface is covered by clouds at any given time. If you could hover high above Earth and look down at the entire planet at once, you would see that more than 2/3 of it is draped in clouds. At any given moment, clouds cover roughly 67% of Earth's surface. This cloudy veil shifts and changes constantly, clouds forming in one region and dissipating in another, storms building and dissolving. But on average, the planet wears a partial blanket of water droplets and ice crystals. The distribution of clouds is not random. Satellite observations have revealed 3 main zones where clouds are most persistent: the mid-latitudes in both hemispheres and the equatorial region. These zones correspond to Earth's large-scale atmospheric circulation patterns. At the equator, intense solar heating causes air to rise, and as it rises, it cools and forms clouds. In the mid-latitudes, the meeting of warm air from the tropics and cold air from the poles creates weather fronts and storm systems that generate extensive cloud cover. Clouds play a crucial role in regulating Earth's temperature. During the day, they reflect sunlight back into space, preventing some of the sun's energy from reaching the ground. This has a cooling effect. At night, clouds trap heat radiating from Earth's surface, preventing it from escaping into space. This has a warming effect. The balance between these two effects depends on the type, altitude, and thickness of the clouds. High, thin clouds tend to have a net warming effect because they let sunlight through but trap outgoing heat. Low, Thick clouds tend to have a net cooling effect because they reflect more sunlight than they trap heat. Understanding clouds is essential. Understanding climate. As global temperatures change, cloud patterns may shift in ways that either amplify or moderate the warming. Scientists study clouds intensively, using satellites, aircraft, and ground-based instruments, trying to predict how they will respond to a changing climate. Despite decades of research, clouds remain one of the largest sources of uncertainty in climate models. These floating masses of water, so familiar and yet so complex, hold keys to Earth's future that we are still working to understand. Noctilucent clouds are the highest clouds in Earth's atmosphere, forming about 80 kilometers above the surface. Most clouds exist in the troposphere, the lowest layer of the atmosphere where weather occurs. But there is a rare type of cloud that forms far higher, in the mesosphere, a region where the air is so thin that it barely qualifies as atmosphere at all. These are noctilucent clouds, and they form about 80 kilometers above Earth's surface, roughly 5 times higher than commercial jets fly. Noctilucent means night shining, and the name is fitting. These clouds are visible only during twilight, appearing after sunset or before sunrise when the sun is below the horizon for an observer on the ground, but still illuminates the high atmosphere. From below, they appear as delicate, silvery blue veils or ripples against the darkening sky, glowing with reflected sunlight, while the world beneath them lies in shadow. They are most commonly seen at high latitudes, in regions near the Arctic and Antarctic circles, during summer months when the upper atmosphere is coldest. How clouds form at such extreme altitudes, where the air is millions of times thinner than at sea level, remains something of a mystery. The mesosphere is one of the coldest places on Earth, with temperatures dropping below -120 degrees Celsius. At these temperatures, even the tiny amount of water vapor present can freeze, condensing onto microscopic particles of meteor dust that constantly rain down from space. The ice crystals that form are incredibly small and delicate, but when the sun's light catches them at just the right angle, they shimmer. Scientists have noticed that noctilucent clouds may be becoming more common and appearing at lower latitudes than they used to, possibly due to changes in the upper atmosphere caused by greenhouse gas emissions. Methane and other gases that warm the lower atmosphere can actually cool the upper atmosphere as they rise and release energy. This cooling could create conditions more favorable for noctilucent cloud formation. If this is true, these beautiful, ethereal clouds may be an unexpected signal of changes happening far above our heads, in a part of the atmosphere we rarely think about. Some deserts receive less than 25 millimeters of rain per year, yet they support diverse ecosystems. When we think of deserts, we often picture barren landscapes devoid of life, endless expanses of sand under a relentless sun. But this image misses the truth of what deserts are. While it is accurate that deserts are defined by their lack of water, receiving less than 250 millimeters of rain annually, and many receive far less than that, they are far from lifeless. Even in the driest deserts, those that barely see 25 millimeters of rain in a year, life has found ways to persist. The organisms that inhabit deserts have evolved remarkable adaptations to cope with water scarcity. Plants like cacti have developed thick, water-storing stems and waxy coatings that minimize water loss. Their leaves have transformed into spines, reducing surface area and protecting the plant from animals desperate for moisture. Other desert plants, called ephemerals, remain dormant as seeds for years, waiting for the rare rainstorm. When rain finally comes, they germinate, grow, flower, and produce seeds, all within a matter of weeks, completing their entire life cycle in the brief window when water is available. Desert animals have their own strategies. Many are nocturnal, avoiding the scorching daytime heat by sheltering underground in burrows where temperatures remain cooler. They emerge at night to hunt and forage when the air is more tolerable. Some animals, like kangaroo rats, never drink water at all. They obtain all the moisture they need from the seeds they eat, and their kidneys are so efficient at conserving water that their urine is highly concentrated. Reptiles thrive in deserts, partly because they are cold-blooded and do not waste energy maintaining a constant body temperature. They can let their body heat rise and fall with the environment, reducing their metabolic needs. The biodiversity of deserts may not be as immediately obvious as that of a rainforest, but it is significant. Insects, reptiles, small mammals, birds, and specialized plants create ecosystems that are finely tuned to the desert's harsh conditions. These organisms have not merely survived. They have adapted so well that many desert species are found nowhere else. They are specialists in the art of scarcity, thriving in a world where water is the rarest and most precious resource. Deserts remind us that life is tenacious, that evolution can find solutions to even the most extreme challenges, and that ecosystems do not require lush abundance to be rich in diversity and beauty. Desert sand dunes can reach heights of over 180 meters and constantly shift with the wind. In the heart of many deserts, where sand has accumulated in vast quantities, the landscape becomes an ocean of dunes. These dunes are not static features, but living formations that change shape and migrate across the desert floor, driven by wind. Some dunes can tower more than 180 meters high, roughly the height of a 60-story building. Standing at the base of such a dune, looking up at its sweeping curves and sharp crest, is to feel very small in the presence of something shaped by forces both simple and immense. Dunes form when wind blows sand particles across the ground. The grains bounce and roll, accumulating in areas where the wind slows or where obstacles disrupt the flow of air. Over time, these accumulations grow into distinct shapes. The most common type is the crescent or Barkhan dune, with gentle slopes on the windward side and steep slip faces on the leeward side. Wind pushes sand up the gentle slope, and when the grains reach the crest, they tumble down the steep face, causing the dune to slowly migrate in the direction of the prevailing wind. The movement of dunes can be surprisingly fast on a geological timescale, sometimes advancing several meters per year. In extreme cases, migrating dunes can engulf roads, buildings, and even entire villages, forcing people to relocate or continuously dig out buried structures. But the dunes themselves are fragile. Disturbing the surface by driving vehicles across them or removing vegetation that stabilizes the sand can trigger erosion and alter the delicate balance that holds the dune in place. Despite their barren appearance, sand dunes can support life. Specialized plants with long roots manage to anchor themselves in the shifting sand, stabilizing small areas. Insects burrow beneath the surface, where temperatures are cooler and moisture, however scant, can be found. Reptiles hunt along the slopes, and birds use the high crests as vantage points. The dunes create a landscape of constant change, a place where the only permanence is the wind itself, endlessly sculpting and reshaping the desert into forms of stark, flowing beauty. Cacti store water in their thick stems and can survive for years without rain. In the deserts of the Americas, cacti stand as symbols of resilience, their thick, fleshy stems rising from the arid ground in forms that range from small, round barrels to towering saguaros with upraised arms. These plants have mastered the art of water storage, turning their stems into reservoirs that can hold enough moisture to sustain them through years of drought. The secret lies in the structure of the stem itself. Cactus stems are made of spongy tissue that expands to store water when it is available, and contracts slowly as the plant uses that water over time. A large saguaro cactus can weigh several tons, and much of that weight is water. The plant absorbs water through a shallow but extensive root system that spreads out just beneath the surface, ready to capture any moisture from rare rainstorms before it evaporates or seeps too deeply into the ground. To minimize water loss, cacti have evolved several adaptations. Their leaves have transformed into spines, which reduce surface area and therefore reduce evaporation. The spines also provide shade to the stem's surface and deter animals from trying to access the water stored inside. The outer skin of a cactus is thick and waxy, creating a barrier that prevents moisture from escaping. And unlike most plants, which open pores called stomata during the day to take in carbon dioxide for photosynthesis, cacti open their stomata at night when temperatures are cooler and humidity is higher, reducing water loss. Some cacti can live for more than 150 years, enduring decade after decade in environments where rain is measured in millimeters per year rather than meters. During those rare occasions when rain does fall, the desert transforms. Cacti flower within days, their blooms brilliant and short-lived, attracting pollinators in a brief explosion of color and activity. Seeds germinate, and the desert, for a moment, seems almost lush. Then the water is gone, the flowers wither, and the cacti return to their patient waiting, living monuments to the power of adaptation. Some desert animals can survive their entire lives without drinking water. In a landscape where water is scarce, the ability to survive without drinking seems almost impossible. Yet many desert animals have evolved to do exactly that. These creatures obtain all the moisture they need from the food they eat or from metabolic processes within their own bodies, never once drinking liquid water. The kangaroo rat, a small rodent native to North American deserts, is perhaps the most famous example. It feeds primarily on dry seeds, which might seem like an unlikely source of hydration. But when the kangaroo rat digests these seeds, its metabolism breaks down carbohydrates and produces water as a byproduct, a process called metabolic water production. Combined with kidneys that are extraordinarily efficient at concentrating urine and nasal passages that recover moisture from exhaled air, the kangaroo rat can meet all its water needs without ever drinking. Other desert animals have similar adaptations. Certain beetles in the Namib Desert collect water from fog that rolls in from the ocean. They position themselves on dunes, with their bodies tilted, and moisture from the fog condenses on their backs and trickles down into their mouths. It is not drinking in the conventional sense, but it is a way of harvesting water from the air itself. Some carnivorous desert animals, like foxes and snakes, obtain most of their water from the blood and tissues of their prey. As long as they can catch enough food, they do not need to seek out water sources. These adaptations highlight a fundamental principle of life in extreme environments. When resources are scarce, organisms evolve extraordinary mechanisms to conserve and acquire them. The desert, for all its harshness, is a laboratory of evolutionary innovation, a place where the constraints of the environment have driven life to develop solutions that seem almost miraculous. The animals that thrive there do so not despite the absence of water, but because they have become so efficient at managing moisture that they can extract what they need from sources other animals would never consider. Antarctica is the largest desert on Earth, defined by its extremely low precipitation. When most people hear the word desert, they think of heat, sand, and sun. But the technical definition of a desert is not based on temperature, it is based on precipitation. A desert is any region that receives less than 250 millimeters of rain or equivalent precipitation per year. By this definition, the largest desert on Earth is not the Sahara, but Antarctica, the frozen continent at the bottom of the world. Antarctica is a polar desert, a place where the air is so cold that it holds almost no moisture. Snowfall is rare, and when it does snow, the accumulation is usually light. Most of the continent receives less than 50 millimeters of water equivalent per year, and some interior regions receive even less. The snow that does fall does not melt. It accumulates over millennia, compressing into the thick ice sheets that cover the continent. But the climate is so dry that in terms of liquid water availability, Antarctica is as much a desert as the driest stretches of the Sahara. The cold itself creates the aridity. Cold air cannot hold much water vapor, so even though Antarctica is surrounded by ocean, very little moisture evaporates into the air, and very little falls as precipitation. The continent is a frozen desert, a place where water exists in abundance, but almost entirely in solid form, locked in ice that is, in some places, more than 4 kilometers thick. Despite these extreme conditions, life persists. Along the coasts and on ice-free areas, mosses, lichens and algae manage to grow during the brief Antarctic summer. In the ocean surrounding the continent, life is abundant, with seals, penguins and whales thriving in the nutrient-rich waters. But on the interior ice sheet, life is nearly absent. The conditions are too cold, too dry, and too isolated for most organisms to survive. Antarctica is a reminder that deserts come in many forms, that the defining characteristic of these landscapes is not heat, but the scarcity of liquid water. Whether scorching or freezing, deserts are places where water is the limiting factor, and life must adapt or perish. Clouds can move at speeds exceeding 160 kilometers per hour. Clouds may appear to drift lazily across the sky, their motion gentle and unhurried. But this perception is an illusion created by distance and scale. Clouds are often moving much faster than they seem, driven by powerful winds high in the atmosphere. At certain altitudes, particularly where jet streams flow, clouds can race across the sky at speeds exceeding 160 kilometers per hour, faster than many highway speed limits. The speed at which a cloud moves depends on the altitude at which it forms and the strength of the wind at that altitude. Low clouds, close to the ground, tend to move more slowly, shaped by surface winds that are slowed by friction with the earth. But high clouds, particularly cirrus clouds that form in the upper troposphere, are caught in the jet stream, ribbons of wind that circle the globe at altitudes of 10 to 15 kilometers. The jet stream can reach speeds of 300 kilometers per hour or more, and clouds caught in its flow are swept along like leaves in a river. These high-speed clouds play a role in weather patterns far beyond their immediate location. The jet stream helps steer storms and weather systems, pushing them across continents and oceans. A cloud forming over the Pacific might be carried thousands of kilometers in just a day or two, eventually releasing its moisture as rain over land far from where it first appeared. The movement of clouds is also an indicator of atmospheric dynamics. Meteorologists track cloud motion to understand wind patterns, predict storm development, and monitor the behavior of weather systems. Satellite imagery can show clouds swirling in vast spirals around low-pressure centers or streaming in long, parallel lines along the jet stream. What appears from the ground as a single cloud drifting overhead is often part of a much larger system, a moving piece of a dynamic atmosphere in constant motion. Even when clouds seem still, they are changing, forming and dissolving, shifting shape as water vapor condenses and evaporates in response to the ever-changing conditions of the air around them. Mammatus clouds are rare formations that appear as pouches hanging beneath the base of a cloud, often signaling severe weather. Among the most unusual and striking cloud formations are mammatus clouds, whose name comes from the Latin word for breast or udder. These clouds appear as bulbous, pouch-like protrusions hanging from the underside of a larger cloud deck, creating a lumpy, undulating appearance across the sky. Seeing mammatus clouds can be unsettling, as they often occur in association with severe thunderstorms, and their strange, almost surreal appearance adds to the sense of foreboding. Mammatus clouds form due to intense turbulence within the storm cloud. The exact mechanism is still debated among meteorologists, but the leading theory is that they result from downdrafts within the cloud. As air sinks, it can create pockets of cooler, heavier air that sag below the cloud base, forming the characteristic pouches. The turbulence required to create this structure is typically found in strong thunderstorms, particularly those with powerful updrafts and downdrafts. While mammatus clouds are often seen beneath cumulonimbus clouds that have just produced severe weather, they themselves are not dangerous. By the time mammatus clouds are visible, the most severe part of the storm has usually already passed. However, their presence is a sign that the atmosphere is highly unstable and that significant weather has recently occurred or may occur again. Viewing mammatus clouds is a reminder of the dynamic and sometimes violent processes happening in the atmosphere above. The smooth, rounded shapes of the pouches contrast sharply with the chaotic conditions that create them. They can last for just a few minutes or persist for an hour or more, slowly shifting and changing shape before dissipating as the storm moves away and the turbulence subsides. Photographers prize mammatus clouds for their dramatic appearance, often capturing them at sunset when the low angle of the sun casts them in shades of pink, orange, and purple against a darkening sky. Fog is simply a cloud that forms at ground level. Walking through fog is an eerie experience. Visibility drops to just a few meters. Sounds become muffled. The air feels damp and cool against your skin. But fog, for all its mystery, is not fundamentally different from the clouds floating high above. It is, in fact, exactly the same thing, a cloud that forms at ground level instead of in the sky. Fog forms when air near the ground cools to the point where it can no longer hold all its water vapor. The vapor condenses into tiny droplets, just as it would in a cloud, and these droplets remain suspended in the air, creating the characteristic white or grey haze. There are several ways fog can form. Radiation fog is common on clear, calm nights, when the ground loses heat through radiation. The air directly above the ground cools, moisture condenses, and fog forms in low-lying areas. Advection fog occurs when warm, moist air moves over a cooler surface, such as when air from over warm ocean water blows over cold land. The cooling causes condensation and fog. Upslope fog forms when air rises up a mountain slope, cools, and condenses. And evaporation fog, also called steam fog, forms when cold air passes over warm water, causing moisture to evaporate from the water's surface and immediately condense in the cold air, creating wisps of fog that rise like steam. Despite being low to the ground, fog can have significant effects. It disrupts travel, reducing visibility for drivers, pilots, and ships. It affects local ecosystems by providing moisture to plants even in the absence of rain, particularly in coastal regions where fog is frequent. Some forests, like the coastal redwood forests of California, depend on fog for much of their water, capturing droplets from the air through their needles and dripping them to the ground. Fog is transient, often burning off when the sun rises and warms the air. But while it lasts, it transforms the landscape, creating a world of soft edges and hidden distances. A reminder that clouds are not always high above, but sometimes walk among us, wrapping the world in gentle obscurity. Certain types of clouds can indicate specific weather conditions within the next day or two. For thousands of years, people have looked to the sky to predict the weather. Long before satellites and computer models, farmers, sailors, and travelers learned to read clouds, using their shapes, movements, and appearances as clues to what the atmosphere was about to do. This folk knowledge was remarkably accurate, because clouds are visible manifestations of atmospheric processes, and certain cloud types reliably indicate coming changes in weather. Cirrus clouds, those thin, wispy strands high in the sky, often signal that a weather front is approaching. They form ahead of warm fronts as moisture is lifted high into the atmosphere, and their appearance can indicate that rain or snow may arrive within a day or two. If cirrus clouds thicken and lower, becoming cirrostratus clouds that create a halo around the sun or moon, the probability of precipitation within the next day increases. Altocumulus clouds, mid-level clouds that appear as rows or patches, can signal instability in the atmosphere. If seen on a humid morning, they can indicate that thunderstorms may develop later in the day. Cumulonimbus clouds, the towering giants associated with thunderstorms, are impossible to miss and indicate that severe weather is either occurring or imminent. Their anvil-shaped tops, spreading out where the cloud reaches the stable stratosphere, are a sign of powerful updrafts and the potential for heavy rain, lightning, hail, or even tornadoes. Conversely, small, fair-weather cumulus clouds that dot the sky on a sunny day and dissolve in the evening usually indicate stable conditions. These clouds form from daytime heating and dissipate as the sun sets, a sign that the atmosphere is not particularly unstable and that significant weather is unlikely in the near term. Modern meteorology has expanded far beyond simple cloud observation, using data from satellites, radar, weather balloons, and computer simulations. But clouds remain an essential part of weather forecasting, and learning to read them can still provide useful, immediate information about what the sky has in store. The clouds overhead are not just decoration. They are messengers, carrying information about the invisible currents and pressures that shape our weather. Contrails from airplanes are artificial clouds that can persist for hours. If you look up on a clear day and see a white line stretching across the sky behind an airplane, you are watching a cloud form in real time. These lines, called contrails, short for condensation trails, are human-made clouds created by the hot, moist exhaust from jet engines. As the exhaust enters the cold air of the upper atmosphere, the water vapor in it condenses and freezes into tiny ice crystals, forming a visible trail behind the aircraft. Contrails can behave in different ways depending on atmospheric conditions. If the upper atmosphere is dry, the contrail will dissipate quickly, evaporating within minutes as the ice crystals sublimate back into invisible vapor. But if the air is humid, near saturation with water vapor, the contrail can persist and even spread, eventually becoming indistinguishable from natural cirrus clouds. These persistent contrails can last for hours, gradually expanding and merging with other contrails or natural clouds, affecting the local cloud cover. Scientists have studied the impact of contrails on climate. By increasing cloud cover, contrails can trap heat that would otherwise escape into space, contributing to warming. The effect is small compared to other sources of greenhouse warming, but it is measurable. Some research has explored whether changing flight paths or altitudes to avoid conditions that produce persistent contrails could reduce this impact. The presence of contrails is also used as an educational tool. By observing how quickly they dissipate or persist, students and weather enthusiasts can learn about the moisture content and temperature of the upper atmosphere. A sky crisscrossed with long-lasting contrails indicates high humidity aloft, which may signal that a weather system is approaching. Contrails are a visible reminder of humanity's impact on the atmosphere, an interaction between technology and nature that leaves temporary but measurable marks across the sky. The smell of rain, called petrichor, comes from oils released by plants and bacteria in the soil. One of the most evocative scents in nature is the smell that arises when rain falls on dry earth. It is a fresh, earthy aroma that seems to carry the promise of growth and renewal. This scent has a name, petrichor, a word coined in 1964 by two Australian researchers who studied its origins. Petrichor is not the smell of water itself, which is odorless, but rather the smell of oils and compounds released from the soil and plants when rain arrives. During dry periods, certain plants secrete oils that coat nearby rocks and soil. These oils slow the germination of seeds, a survival strategy that prevents seeds from sprouting during times when water is scarce. When rain finally falls, it releases these oils into the air, carrying the scent with it. Additionally, a compound called geosmin, produced by soil bacteria known as actinomycetes, is released when raindrops hit the ground. Geosmin has a distinctive earthy smell, and humans are remarkably sensitive to it. We can detect geosmin in concentrations as low as a few parts per trillion, far more sensitively than we can detect many other odors. The smell of rain also includes ozone, a molecule made of 3 oxygen atoms. Ozone is created when lightning splits oxygen molecules in the atmosphere, and its sharp, clean smell often arrives on the wind ahead of a storm. Together, these components create the complex, pleasant aroma that we associate with rain on dry soil. The scent of petrichor may have evolutionary significance. For our ancestors, the smell of rain signaled the end of drought, the replenishment of water sources, and the greening of the landscape. It was a positive, life-affirming signal, and our strong response to the smell may be a remnant of that ancient association. Today, even in urban environments far removed from survival in the wild, the smell of rain still carries a sense of comfort and connection to the natural world, a sensory reminder of the cycles that sustain life. Some clouds produce rain that evaporates before it reaches the ground, a phenomenon called virga. Not all rain that falls from clouds reaches the ground. Sometimes, particularly in dry climates, rain will fall from a cloud only to evaporate as it passes through a layer of drier air below. This phenomenon is called virga, and it creates a distinctive visual effect. Streaks or shafts extending downward from the cloud base, but fading away before touching the earth. Virga is most common in regions where the lower atmosphere is very dry, or when clouds form at high altitudes. As raindrops fall, they enter air with lower humidity. The drier air causes the water to evaporate, absorbing heat in the process and cooling the air. If the layer of dry air is thick enough, all the rain will evaporate before reaching the surface. From a distance, virga appears as curtains or veils hanging beneath clouds, often wispy and delicate. It is particularly striking during sunset, when the low angle of the sun illuminates the falling rain, making it glow against the darkening sky. Virga may seem like a meteorological curiosity with little impact, but it can actually affect weather. The evaporation of rain cools the air through which it falls, and this cooling can create downdrafts. In some cases, these downdrafts reach the ground as gusty winds, even though no rain arrives. In extreme situations, particularly with thunderstorms, the evaporation of rain can lead to what meteorologists call a dry microburst, a powerful downdraft that can cause significant damage at the surface, despite the absence of precipitation. For farmers and gardeners in arid regions, virga is a familiar disappointment. The sight of rain falling from clouds raises hopes of much-needed moisture, only for those hopes to fade as the rain vanishes into the dry air. But virga is also a reminder of the complexity of the atmosphere, of the many factors that determine whether a drop of water completes its journey from cloud to ground or returns to vapor midway, leaving only a ghostly trace of its passage. Deserts can experience dramatic temperature swings, sometimes 40 degrees Celsius between day and night. One of the defining characteristics of deserts is not just heat, but temperature extremes. During the day, under a cloudless sky, the sun beats down with intense radiation, and the ground surface can heat to scorching temperatures, sometimes exceeding 60 degrees Celsius. But when the sun sets, that heat escapes just as quickly as it arrived. Without clouds or moisture in the air to trap the warmth, the desert cools rapidly. By dawn, temperatures may have dropped by 40 degrees Celsius or more, leaving the air cold enough to form frost in some regions. This dramatic temperature swing is a consequence of the desert's dry air and lack of vegetation. In humid environments, water vapor in the air acts as an insulator, absorbing heat during the day and releasing it slowly at night, moderating temperatures. Plants and soil with high moisture content also store heat, releasing it gradually. But in the desert, there is little water vapor and sparse vegetation. The ground absorbs heat during the day, but radiates it away quickly at night. The result is a climate of extremes, where a single day can feel like summer and winter, compressed into 24 hours. Desert organisms have had to adapt to these temperature swings. Many animals are nocturnal, avoiding the heat of the day by remaining in burrows where temperatures are more stable. They emerge at night when the air is cooler, conducting their activities in the relative comfort of the desert night. Plants must endure both extremes, developing tissues that can withstand intense heat without damage and survive near freezing temperatures just hours later. For humans, the temperature extremes of the desert can be deadly if not respected. Travelers in desert regions must prepare for both heat and cold, carrying enough water to stay hydrated during the day and warm clothing to endure the chill of night. The desert teaches humility, a reminder that comfort is not a given, and that survival requires understanding and respecting the environment's rhythms. In the quiet hours before dawn, when the desert is coldest and most still, there is a strange beauty in the harshness, a purity in the extremes that the landscape endures without complaint, day after day, for millions of years. Many desert plants bloom spectacularly after rare rainstorms, carpeting the landscape with color. For most of the year, many deserts appear brown and lifeless, the ground dusty and bare, the plants sparse and drab. But when rain finally comes, the desert can transform seemingly overnight into a sea of color. Wildflowers bloom in masses, painting the landscape in yellows, purples, reds and whites. This phenomenon, known as a desert bloom or superbloom in particularly dramatic years, is one of nature's most spectacular displays. The seeds of desert wildflowers can lie dormant in the soil for years, sometimes decades, waiting for the right conditions. They have evolved mechanisms that prevent germination until multiple conditions are met: enough rain, the right temperature, and sometimes even specific chemical signals from the rain itself that indicate a true storm rather than a brief shower. When these conditions align, the seeds germinate en masse. The plants grow rapidly, racing through their life cycle before the moisture disappears. Within weeks, they flower, attracting pollinators, producing seeds, and then dying, leaving a new generation of seeds in the soil to await the next rain. The timing and extent of desert blooms are unpredictable. Some years, conditions are not right, and little blooms. Other years, everything aligns, and the bloom is extraordinary. In the southwestern United States, superbloom can attract thousands of visitors who come to see the normally barren landscape transformed into a flower garden. The ecological impact of these blooms extends beyond the plants themselves. Pollinators, including bees, butterflies, and moths, benefit from the sudden abundance of nectar and pollen. Birds and small mammals feed on the seeds. The brief burst of productivity ripples through the food web, providing resources that sustain desert animals for months afterward. Desert blooms are a reminder that apparent lifelessness can be a form of patience. The desert is not dead, it is waiting. And when the rains come, it responds with a burst of vitality that belies its barren appearance the rest of the year. The flowers are fleeting, but their impact lingers, seeds for the future scattered on the wind, dormant until the next rain calls them forth. Oases form where underground water reaches the surface, creating fertile islands in the desert. In the midst of the desert's harsh aridity, there are rare places where water rises to the surface, creating pockets of life in an otherwise barren landscape. These are oases, and they have been vital to human survival in deserts for thousands of years. An oasis forms where underground water, often from aquifers fed by rain or snowmelt in distant mountains, finds a path to the surface. This might happen where the water table intersects the land surface, or where geological faults or rock layers force water upward. The presence of water transforms the immediate area. Trees grow, grasses sprout, and animals gather. For humans, oases have served as stopping points along trade routes, places to rest, replenish water supplies, and grow crops. Some oases support date palms, which thrive in hot climates if water is available. The shade from the palms creates a cooler microclimate beneath, allowing other plants to grow. Wells dug into the aquifer can provide water year-round, sustaining small communities. But oases are fragile. They depend on the continued flow of underground water, and if that water is depleted faster than it is replenished, the oasis can dry up. In many desert regions, modern agriculture and growing populations have increased water extraction from aquifers, putting pressure on these ancient water sources. The sight of an oasis after days of travel through desert is said to be almost surreal, a vision of green and water appearing where nothing should grow. It is easy to understand why oases have held cultural and spiritual significance in many desert societies. They are proof that life can persist in the harshest conditions, that even in a landscape defined by absence, there are places where water, the most precious resource, rises to nourish and sustain. Today, as climate change alters precipitation patterns and human demand for water grows, the future of many oases is uncertain, but their importance, both ecological and cultural, remains undiminished. From the sparse beauty of deserts to the flowing abundance of water, from the quiet shifts of clouds to the patient endurance of ancient ecosystems, nature continues to reveal its boundless creativity. Every environment on Earth, no matter how harsh or gentle, tells a story of adaptation, resilience, and interconnection. The facts we have explored tonight are more than information. They are invitations to wonder, reminders of the intricate systems that sustain life on this planet, and glimpses into processes that unfold on timescales far beyond our own. As we come to the end of our journey, let these thoughts settle into your mind like leaves drifting to the forest floor. Let the knowledge of distant mountains and deep oceans, of glowing creatures and patient trees, wrap around you like a soft blanket. You have traveled far tonight, through forests and clouds, across deserts and rivers, touching wonders both vast and small. The world turns on, its cycles continuing whether we watch or not. Clouds drift, water flows, trees grow silently in the darkness. Animals hunt and rest and raise their young. The planet breathes, and somewhere, in some quiet corner of nature, something beautiful is happening right now. But you do not need to witness it all. You do not need to understand every mechanism or remember every fact. Tonight, you have simply spent time with nature. Let its rhythms slow your thoughts. Let its patience remind you that not everything must be urgent or important. Some things simply are, quietly existing, asking nothing of you but your presence in this moment. So now, let it all drift away. The forests, the oceans, the mountains and clouds. Let them fade into the background of your mind, gentle companions as you slip towards sleep. Your breathing slows, your body grows heavy. The day releases its hold on you. You have done enough for today. You have learned, you have wondered, you have been present with the world. Now it is time to rest. Close your eyes and let the darkness be soft around you. Let your thoughts become like clouds, formless and drifting. Let sleep come gently, naturally, like rain soaking into thirsty ground. Tomorrow will come with its own light and its own invitations. But tonight, this quiet moment belongs to rest. Dream, if you dream, of green growing things and patient stones, of water finding its way and wind shaping dunes. Or dream of nothing at all, simply floating in the peaceful dark. You are safe. You are still. You are exactly where you need to be. Good night.